Or Yeah, absolutely.
So I go through once I have actual. Because we're building, which I'll say,
Had both funds and they. Okay. Well, that stopped it there, but.
The host muted you.
Temporarily unmuted. And then to unmute. I did that. It's
Muted you.
Yeah,
They're the
yeah,
host.
I
It
don't know.
must be their fault.
I hate these things.
But not as much as I do. Yeah, I just thought.
Can anyone else on Zoom hear them talking? I show that the town of St. George is currently muted, so we can't hear what's,
I can't hear them either.
yeah, so.
Sorry.
There we go. There we go. You can hear me now. We're sorry about that. If you, you can look at maincoastfishermen.org to get more information about our organization. And I'll talk a little bit more tonight too, but like I said, I'm gonna let the panelists introduce themselves.
Thank you, Monique, and that was a great speech. I'm sorry the folks on Zoom couldn't hear you, but my name is Dr. Sarah Otai. I'm the Executive Director of the Herring Gut Coastal Science Center, and I've been here one whole whopping year, enjoying being here quite a bit. And we are open year round. We worked with over 2,200 K through 12 students last year, all the way from Machias down to Portland, and certainly in the mid-coast area, teaching kids about marine science, the coast, our watersheds, and different types of careers related to the working waterfront. And you can find us even now open 8 to 4, 5 days a week. Right down the street, we've got aquaponics set up, we've got touch tanks, and we spread ourselves throughout the communities, talking to folks about things that they can learn about the marine environment, how to protect our environment, how to learn about everything from pollution to fisheries. And I'll turn it over to Mike, and we're excited because we get to work a lot with the school, the kids at St. George.
Thank you, Sarah. My name is Mike Felton. I'm the superintendent for St. George Municipal School Unit. This is my 10th year at St. George, and our mission is to do whatever it takes to ensure that every single student thrives and contribute to the vitality and resiliency of the town. And part of that effort, has, focused on our career technical education, makerspace building. That is also now a connectivity hub, and I can talk about that, later. But the inspiration for that really came out of the Grace Institute that used to be in this community from, I think, early 1930s through the early 2000s, and it closed during some of the consolidation. And when this town withdrew and created its own district, one of the early messages I got was to bring shop back. So the CT Makerspace building is a way to sort of bring 21st century shop that'll bring together both building, woodworking, and metalwork with newer technologies like 3D printers, laser cutters, CNC routers, and robotics. And it's trying to base it here in the history, traditions, values, and people and landscape of St. George. So that's the work that we're focused on, along with many other things. But turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mike. My name is Randy Cushman. I've been a ground fisherman out of Fort Clyde as a captain for 42 years. And I've actually I've been a fisherman for over 50 years. I've done a little bit of scalloping, shrimping ground fishing is my mainstay. I also did a little bit of lobster in my early stages of fishery. That's what I've been doing most of my life, but now I'm in the process of actually selling out and retiring from it. I'm gonna come ashore and get a land job, so it's gonna be new for me.
You can drive a bus, right?
There
Bus
you
driver?
go. I did put an application in.
You're hired.
There you go.
Done.
Bus driver in town.
Not for bus.
My name's Tony Small. I wear a few hats. I'm a local movement coach. I work with Maine Agribility, which is a project, a USDA funded project to keep fishermen, farmers, and loggers in their business, in their industries. I work a lot with Monique in that role. And then I have an oyster farm with my husband in Port Clyde, and a lobster pound.
I'm Hale Miller, commercial fisherman. Lobster and factory trawling, now presently seaweed harvesting.
Do I need the microphone? Can people on Zoom hear me too? I could be kind of loud. If we want to pass it down, that's fine. I also just quickly wanted to, Emerson Goodrich back there is Maine Coast Fishermen's Association's newest employee. And she will be working very closely with me on a community project that includes St. George. So you all might see her around a little bit more often. Emerson. So we're gonna start kind of broad. I have some questions that I'm gonna ask our panelists, but once we get through a couple of questions, if we love audience participation, and I know St. George residents love to participate. So if you have any questions, this is really meant to be sort of a conversation that's somewhat informal so that we can really talk about what you guys want to talk about. So I think to get us started, to start a little bit more broadly, my question for the panel, and maybe this time we can start with Hale or Tony and work our way back this way. What's a goal that you're trying to achieve right now, whether it's around fishing, your working waterfront property, or even the community of St. George? Hale, if you want to answer, or we can open up to anybody that wants to take a stab at that right out of the gate.
Goals that I'm personally trying to achieve? Or,
Yeah, for fishing or for the working waterfront or for the community of St. George.
As most of everybody knows, the working waterfront, and the definition of it, I guess, is a little bit cloudy because we've lost tremendous amount of work in the waterfront. The Tenants Harbor Fishermen's Co-op, which my brothers and I sold to the tenant, we had put that into the working waterfront, so it can't be changed from the commercial aspect. It can't be sold locked into housing lot or condos or whatever else. So my brothers and I were committed to that for a long time and pursued that to make that happen. And now it's moved on to where the Tenants Harbor Fishermen's Co-op has come into being, and they presently own it, and it makes place for commercial fishermen to offload no matter what. Right now, it's typically lobsters, but there's urchins, some scallops that they're doing, I don't know if shrimp will ever come back. groundfish or any other thing that's gonna happen, seaweed for that matter, which is what I do. Anything that comes along working waterfront now, as you see, has been, it's very hard to find a place to, operate out of. Fort Clyde's a good example. We bought that, the town bought that, town piers now got it going, or gonna have it going this spring. And previous to that, I had to, I asked a couple wharf owners if I could just, store bags down there, empty bags, and that was a no-go. So it's, in my view, it's very, it's important for us to, have a place to have access to get in and out, move your product in and out, and, access to be able to get back and forth to your boats. Those kinds of things like that's important to me.
I have a lot of goals. I'll start with oysters. If you guys were here last year, the process through which aquaculture happens in this state is, long and rigorous. And, I think one of the things Randy and I were talking about beforehand, the press is sort of really anxious to suggest that aquaculture is gonna save the working waterfront. And the back end is the working waterfront folks who are trying to just make any shift, whether it's from lobster to groundfish to seaweed to oysters, is it takes a lot of time, takes a lot of capital, and it does require space, and that space is getting harder and harder to access. And so, but also it is harder and harder to get the permissions to move a business through its hurdles. So we're in a position of now just waiting. We're in a wait mode, that could take anywhere from, well, it's been a year, so it could be another year. And that's very challenging for a small business. And this is one of the things I think that doesn't get said is we're small businesses, we're owner operators, we're trying to make growth happen. In industries that are really new and not really proven. We don't have 40 years of history. We have, well, there's oyster farming on the Damariscotta for 40 years, but there's not been oyster farming necessarily in this particular neck of the woods. And so it's new and there's a lot of hurdles. And so I think patience and support from community is a really important component to kind of keeping the faith.
Well, I'm gonna tell you the biggest reason why I'm selling out and retiring right now from the fishery. It's mainly just one thing, market. The ground fishery right now is the healthiest I've seen it in over 20 years. The resource itself, my father, my grandfather would be impressed if they're still alive to see some of the numbers I've seen, especially in the last 8 years. The problem being is, especially since the pandemic, is the infrastructure's collapsed. And that's basically the market. And when that happened, it hasn't rebounded at all. And, you know, this day and age for a fisherman, a ground fisherman to go out and average $1.50 a pound or $1.25 with the overhead that we have, you know, it's quadrupled since the pandemic. I've been fishing that boat alone for over 4 years because I can't afford to have a crew. And it's really sad because, like I said, the resource is the healthiest I've seen it in over 20 years. So, you have a question, Ben?
Yeah, Randy, can you explain to the people why the market has collapsed? You and I both know why, but I'm not sure everybody else knows.
Yeah, you know, I was telling Tony earlier, you know, we can blame the regulations. It is a big part of why it did collapse. You know, the more cuts that we took to rebuild the resource, the more infrastructure we did lose. But, you know, it's damn if you do, damn if you don't. It did help rebuild the resource by having the regulations. But there has to be a balance at the end of the day. I think in a lot of ways, we did kind of cross the line, went a little bit too far. It'd been nice, it would have been a little bit better if things were slowed down a little bit. We didn't lose as much. but, it's, it was a real difficult decision for me. It breaks my heart. I didn't really want to leave the fishery, to be honest with you. I still love doing it. But if you can't afford to pay a crewman and you go every single season, you go on the negative, in the negative for 4 straight years, you gotta make a serious decision. But, it would be nice. I know we created this little thing down at, in Port Clyde called Port Clyde Press Catch. You know, that helps, but it doesn't, it's just a small Band-Aid compared to what really needs to happen. We need to figure out some way of rebuilding these markets and get this infrastructure back. And that means processing plants, cotton houses. Be nice to have cotton houses, have people cutting fish instead of using machines. I'd like to see that. That's how it was done in the old days. And that's basically what we mainly lost too, when we had the flounders, which was the mainstay out here, was what we call as flatfish. You hear everybody crying wolf about codfish, but guess what? Codfish don't mean a thing out here. Flatfish does. That was our bread and butter. Well, over 90% of those flatfish went to Boston, New York, Chicago, indoor dining. And we know what happened when the pandemic hit. All those restaurants shut down. And when that happened, all the cotton houses went out of business. Yes, Jerry.
Well, I just want to add to that. I'm on the Maine Coast Fishermen Association board, and our goal has been the last 3 years, we've been working our asses off to try to bring more money back to the ground fishermen. It's all great bringing back cutting houses and things like that. I'll stand. But we have a real big problem. I can look around this room, no offense, but looking around this room, there's a few young people, but the majority of us, we're older, including me. We have a working problem. There's no workers. We can get we got the money, we got the means right now, and we got the resource, but we don't have the workers. We have to figure out, we are working with the University of Maine right now to figure out, instead of getting the workforce, get machines that actually will fillet fish and then get them to the marketplace. So there are many, many obstacles in the way of ground fish.
And I actually have a
Yeah.
I'm gonna cut.
Go for it.
I'm a terrible facilitator because I don't think facilitators are supposed to participate, but I'm definitely gonna jump in. So, the workforce issue, yes, is a big thing too. And then the other issue too is, competition from imported seafood. Everybody wants cheap seafood. And everybody only wants cheap salmon and haddock. So to Randy's point, like, flounders and other types of flatfish and being willing to pay for a good local or even American product is also a really important aspect of that. So it's funny that we kind of split up this way, like that side of the panel, you guys brought up that you're all working incredibly hard on different types of working waterfront access, infrastructure access, access to markets, and even diversification in fisheries, which, to be clear, in 2025, diversification in fisheries doesn't just mean other fisheries. It can mean things like construction or electrician or marine construction. It's a really important thing to consider for young fishermen to think about how they can diversify and supplement their income. So on that note, Mike, and this side of the table, what are you guys doing for some goal setting and things to help that side of the table?
Keep me up pretty well for that.
I mean,
So yeah, as I said, our mission of our school is ensuring every single student thrives and contributing to this community. And part of the vision of that is making sure that we have a viable, strong year-round community in perpetuity that stays connected to our history, our heritage, and who we are as a community. So that was sort of the animating vision behind the CT Makerspace building. And as it's grown, it basically has 3 components. And one of them is pre-K through 12 career and technical education. So from day 1 in pre-K, when kids come in to when they graduate, when they're 18, they are doing hands-on, minds-on technical learning connected to career and community. So a month ago, we had 6-year-olds in kindergarten using tape measures to measure a 2x4 and then cutting it with saws. We've had first graders using hammers and nails to build wooden trucks. We've had third graders programming robots. We've had middle school students entering competitions for USM to create these payloads that go up in these hot air or high altitude balloons and take measurements as they go up. So everything you can imagine from woodworking to robotics. What we've found, and part of the reason we're doing it, is that we need to do that to keep our kids engaged in learning. How kids learn now is just different for a variety of reasons. So in some ways, going back to our roots of hands-on applied learning, you almost have to do that to keep kids engaged. The beauty of that is that it can lead them into careers where they can stay right here in St. George. So our first goal is to re-engage students in their learning. Our second goal is to make sure that our students have the skills to thrive in today's workforce, meet labor shortage demands, and create the businesses and the industries of the future. And what I always say is, I don't care if they go to Midco School of Technology and get their welding certification, if they get out of school, start their own business, go to a 2-year college, 4-year college, or they go to MIT and get their PhD in engineering. I honestly don't care. As long as they're choosing their path, they make a good living, they do work with dignity, and they can take care of themselves and their family, then I think we've done our job. Our job is to make sure they understand the pathways and they can go down those pathways. So we've worked with a lot of local businesses. We've really tried to integrate businesses. Michael Cushman and Cassie have been a key part of our CT Makerspace work and engaging our students. We work with Chris Levitt, we work with Chip Bauer, we work with Steel Pro, we work with Knox Machine, integrating them into the work we do with students. So like I said, from 4 years old all the way through, kids see the opportunities in their community and in their region, and there are a lot. And then that all goes into strengthening the local economy. We want to have a skilled and diversified workforce so that our kids can get good paying jobs here and that they have the skills to adjust if there are changes in markets. The second part of the project is adult education and workforce training. And we're partnering with, again, local businesses, the Maine Community College System, the Rue Institute, and others to provide programs, and we're working on developing this, that range from welding to information technology, from data analytics to be trained to be a line cook. And to allow adults in our community, whether they're interested in learning a skill, just pure interest, or whether they need to supplement their income, or whether they need to transfer to a higher paying job, but be able to do that and stay in St. Jude. That's one of the primary goals. And then the third piece of what we're doing is integrating telehealth with the town's paramedicine program. So people in the community can get access to healthcare more easily and more affordably. So people could go online and request to have a telehealth appointment at the new building, here at the town office, the Community Development Corporation, at Jackson Memorial Library. Online, you can request to have a paramedic come to that telehealth appointment and also provide follow-up care. And all of this, the big vision is to have a healthy, highly skilled and innovative workforce that sustains strong families, a strong community, and a strong diversified economy. So but all of this started with a vision coming from this community around the Grace Institute and re-engaging kids in learning. And it sort of grew into what I just described.
Perfect. Thanks. We do much of the same at Herring Gut. We experienced the same issue during COVID. Kids changed their methods of learning, their focus. There were so many things going at home and in their communities that kids had to be brought back into a learning environment that worked for them. And we have discovered through 25 years of work that hands-on abilities out in nature, in the lobster pound, working with fishermen, really makes a difference for kids. A lot of what we're doing also dovetails directly with what Mike's doing, and a lot of the rebuilding and refurbishing we're doing is to provide spaces for kids from St. George to actually come in and work on an aquarium, to work with our aquaponics unit, to grow food, to learn about aquaculture, to work with our oysters that are out in a lobster pound. One of our biggest challenges this year for everyone was we took a lot of damage, of course, in the storms from last January 10th and 13th. We're rebuilding our lobster pound. We're working our bait shack so that the public and kids have a place that they can go see what a working lobster pound looks like. They can do research in our pound, looking at everything from using robotics to examine measurement systems underwater, look at oysters. They've got an area that actually ties back to our heritage and our history. We're doing a lot of interpretive signage so that the public can understand what a waterfront is all about and what Port Clyde is all about. We're trying to increase and diversify our curriculum so that there's a variety of topics that kids can learn about, whether it's how lobsters have played a role in the area, what it means to have clean water, how do we build with nature in mind, how do we deal with warming waters, how do we deal with microplastics. We've got a speaker in a couple of weeks coming to talk to us about microplastics, and we're taking 6, 8, 9-year-olds out to places like Drift In Beach, sifting the sand, showing them what kind of microplastics are out there in that sand that are getting into our fish, getting into us, and getting into the environment. We've got classes on seaweeds, looking at community science and fresh water, and we're trying to fill that niche that provides the ability for kids year-round to learn how they can work and live in this environment, how they can support fisheries and their communities, and how we can build better citizens and better scientists and basically a stronger community. So much of what we're doing is dovetailing exactly with what Mike's doing. We're setting aside space in all of our buildings so that there's space for kids to come and learn and explore and figure out what they want to do. And that's really important to us. And all of this, of course, is a challenge because it requires resources, time, and a workforce that can stay here.
Thanks, everybody. I can't say enough good things about Maine's CTE programs, the career and technical education. Both of my kids, one is finished, she had graduated with her welding certification, and my son is in building trades, and he's gonna do pre-apprenticeship and also the electrician program. Electrician is one of the #1 hiring positions in the state of Maine right now. And it just, the hands-on opportunities and the skills and just the experiences, you learn what you like and what you don't like, makes all the difference in the world. So I read this book a while back called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday, if you're interested. And I think, listening to some of the obstacles and some of the goals that everybody has, and I think Tony, I'll start with you with this, especially listening to Mike and Sarah, sounds like there's some real opportunities here, but there's also the obstacles that were described to, like around the markets and the infrastructures and things like that. Obstacles give people an opportunity to be creative because it's a challenge and you can't just say, okay, I'm done. I guess I'm not going to do aquaculture anymore. Like you and John have invested a lot. So how do you see some of the obstacles and some of the things that Mike and Sarah are doing is kind of helping your business and providing some hope for the future? Mind passing that down.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. And I'm afraid I might be a little bit locked in so there's. Well, we've had to be creative in the sense that we've also had to be scrappy and, Maine has a reputation for being scrappy. And I do think actually one of the things that has benefited us, this is paradoxical because to Randy and Jerry's point about market, how do I say this all out loud at once? Okay, so there's the fact that you have a product, you're trying to grow a product to get it to market, right? It's a 3-year, 4-year, sometimes 5-year product. And because we've been limited in terms of our permission, we can't expand until we have the DMR saying, yes, now you have permission to expand. So we're very contained, we're very small, which means we're not necessarily yet a profitable, viable business if you were to look at it from a strictly return on investment, right? But on the other hand, because we started a number of years ago, because we've been scrappy, we're also not grossly indebted to anyone else. This is a project that we're growing ourselves, and building up ourselves and hopefully can endure long enough. And I do think that's one of the things that I also hear. I'm sitting here going, I moved here almost 20 years ago. And I remember having a conversation with the editor at the time of Working Waterfront Journal about how education was coming back around to experimental and experiential learning. And it was sort of interesting because I felt like, wait, did that horse really leave the gate yet? But I think what can be interesting in terms of time and having like a long time to view how hard this process is then also understanding like if we're as a community interested in supporting Working Waterfront, interested in supporting kids develop these capacities, we need to start yesterday, we need to start 10 years ago. And the best time to start is tomorrow, but because it's a very slow organic process, and I think we're challenged here by resources distribution, like the market, like things have collapsed. So I think it is both our blessing and our curse, essentially. Like, and I think being mindful of these things as we envision, like, how do we support kids in the future, in the next 20-year cycle, is giving them, and I'm thrilled to hear the kids are doing things with their hands and that they're actually learning again through doing, because I think we've had a 20-year window where we sort of glorified a lot of things, and we've been pushing, like we push in the media, we push this idea aquaculture is going to save us. Well, maybe it will, but not if people don't understand what the risks are, what the limitations are, what the problems are, and there are a lot of them. And so I think we've gotten into a very fast media conversation, and the conversations and the requirements of building something is incredibly slow. So I guess that we feel strongly about the fact that we're continuing in the fight, but it feels like one of those things, like to Randy's point, like you're not exactly sure if you're stupid to keep going or really smart. And the jury's still out.
Do you have room for a Zoom in there?
What? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I don't know if you see me or not. Dick Nixon. One of the problems, among others, especially when you talked about the pandemic and how it shut things down, it certainly did that. But in my experience, I was 34 years in the construction business in Tennants Harbor, and I retired. And the last part of my retirement was earlier than I planned because I couldn't get help. Like everybody else, it was one thing after another. There's nobody that learning the trades. And unfortunately, for way too many years, the only thing that was stressed in schools was higher education. Go to college, you get a degree, get a, become a middle manager and work your way up to the top, and you're going to make all this money. Unfortunately, in the process of doing all that, everything else fell by the wayside because everybody for several years believed that the only way you could make a good living was going to college. Of course, the reality is, if you've paid a plumbing bill, you know what it costs to get those kind of things done. And the trades, especially after the pandemic and with social media, I think the everybody wants to get to the moon without a rocket ship. They all think they can go on Facebook or YouTube and make $1 billion. And of course, it's very slowly, I think some of that's coming back around again when they find out there's only a few people that make that kind of money. But my point is that the more you guys, and unfortunately we're all in that boat, whether it's Randy with his boat retiring because he can't get help, and every trade is in that situation, whether it's an electrician, whether it's a carpenter's or whatever, or a fisherman. You can't get the help. And now we're finally starting to bring that back into the scheme of things. But the point is that that's 20 years down the road. And for everybody else that's here now and it can't get the help, a lot more people are dropping out of business every day for one reason or another. And it's kind of unfortunate, but I hope that when all the hustle and bustle of making $1 billion on YouTube finally starts to fade away, and people realize that yes, you can go out and learn how to fish, and if you can get enough help, you can make a damn good living, or you can go out and be an electrician and probably make a lot more money than you would going to college in a hell of a lot less time. I hope all that comes back around, but right now, of course, not only a loss of places for, in this case, for the fishermen to have a place to fish or have a place to put their equipment because the waterfront's disappearing, the lack of help. And Randy said it well when he said, we got a market, we got a product, but we don't have a market. We can't get the help to sell it. And it's all, the market fell apart because of it. And that's true in most of the trades right now. And all us old guys who know how to do all this stuff, we're all going to drop dead. And there's not going to be anybody out there that can pick it up. And that's already happening. You can't get this fixed. You can't get a plumber. You can't get an electrician. You can't get whatever. We all experience that every day of the week. And the fact that the school now, this makerspace, I think is a wonderful thing. I think it's the most fantastic thing. The question is whether you can get kids away from social media long enough to learn a trade. I don't know whether you can do that or not. That's
See me up good on that one too. So I'll tell you a quick story. I don't think that it has to be 20 years out. So we have a student, Bryson Maddox, who just graduated from high school. And he got into the makerspace in 7th grade, in part because he was sort of bored in class. So he didn't struggle in school. It was sort of easy for him, but he wasn't engaged. So he started working with Paul Meinsman, our makerspace director, and just had all different projects. He learned how to use a laser cutter. The pandemic hit, he's at home. His parents buy him his own laser cutter, a small version of it. And he starts his own business making cribbage boards and selling them. He goes on to Midcoast School of Technology. He goes into their machining. I think he does composites manufacturing. And he starts working, interning, I think, at Lyman Morse. So by the time he gets, and then his senior year, he did Skills USA and he came in 3rd in the nation. And I forget if it was composite manufacturing or auto detailing, something like that. And so when he graduated high school, he had 3 options. He could, Lyman Morse would hire him right out of high school. Sure, making good money. He could have gone to a 2-year college and get a certification in the field he's interested in, or he could have gone to UMaine into their composites manufacturing program. He chose community college because he's in, well, it's free. I can do it for 2 years. It's not going to cost me anything. I'll get my certification. And then if I want to go to a 4-year school, I can, or maybe I'll just get work right out of community college. That's how we want every one of our kids to look at it, is understand all the options, the value of them, and decide what's best for you. So that was from 7th grade to, like, he could have graduated high school and been working at Lyman Moore. So I just think the need is high, but I will also say that's a huge opportunity for our kids, because if there is high demand, there is also high pay, which means if they have the skills, they can remain in our community. So that's what we're trying to get out in front of.
I think that's such an awesome story. But thinking about what I think his name was Dick said, I think there is somewhat of a cultural shift that needs to happen. It sort of sounded like that's what you were alluding to, is that I'm so glad, was it Bryson? Yeah, I hope his parents or whomever his guardians were like supportive that gave him that opportunity. I think the issue is there are still a lot of people that have the mindset that you do have to go to college and you do have to get your master's. That's just what you do.
that's exactly where I'm coming from.
Yeah. So, and then also the side of, like, one of the things I've been talking about a lot with the Fisherman Wellness Program is commercial fishing. I'm sure everybody in this room knows, especially some of the guys in the back, is very, very hard work. And there's not a lot of people that want to work that hard to make an income, no matter how passionate or much joy they might find in it. And so even that type of cultural shift needs to happen, whether it's construction, welding, or other things. And it sounds like, though, Mike, with your programs, you give kids the opportunity to sort of experience that and understand, and find joy and passion and be able to take those career paths. But there is still that cultural shift. But hopefully things like this help too, right? So before we move on to other things, are there any questions from the audience or anything? Ooh, go ahead. To the people on Zoom, sorry, there doesn't seem to be a chat feature for some reason, so I apologize for that. But if you want to say something, if you can click the react button and raise your hand, or if you just turn on your camera and raise your hand physically, I will let Monique know. Thank you. Was there anything else anybody wanted to add to any of the cultural shift or work or anything on the panel? Yep, go ahead.
I had one point I wanted to make, and I'm sure Mike sees this too, is that kids really want to solve problems. In addition to marketing problems with the fisheries, climate change, what's happening with our warming Gulf of Maine, kids want to figure out how to make things better, whether it's what's to do about green crabs, how to bring back soft shell clams, what's happening with ocean acidification. That's one thing we're noticing when kids come talk to us is they see all of these issues on the planet, they see issues in the community, and they want to help. And when you give them the chance to explore different solutions, we found that they really rise to the occasion and think of things we'll never think of different technologies, different things to grow, ways to address the environment. And that's one thing that I think we should encourage, is listening to kids and helping them help us stay around.
Absolutely. So Hale and Randy and Tony, what would your advice be for the next generation then? All of this considered and all of your own experiences, what would you want, like, this generation of kids and the next generation to know? Mike, I'm asking. Thanks. You want to take a stab at that, Hale?
Randy.
Randy, go ahead.
I like to tell the next generation, if they're gonna choose the ocean fishing, or anything commercial on the ocean, probably should think about learning something different first, just to have a backup plan, because it's evolving all the time. The changes I've seen in 40, 50 years is dramatic. It's been amazing. I can't believe how much things have changed over that time, so you need to be more diverse, I guess, is the right word to say. That's what I think I made the biggest mistake in my career was, I chose two main fisheries, and it was shrimp and ground fishing. And, we've seen what's happened there. So that would be my advice.
Randy, could you explain that a little more clearly? That you said a lot of things have changed. What is making you leave? What has been so hard?
It's been what I said earlier, mainly market right now. My brother Jerry had a valid point. Crew is very difficult to find. You can find crew, but I hate to say this, but in the last few years, it's been difficult to find a crew that even has a license, that's not drug-free, sober, shows up on time, and really wants to do it. That has a lot to do with the fishery itself. If the fishery is not healthy and it's not paying well, you're gonna get what you get. That makes sense. Right.
Thank you.
Basically agree with what Randy's saying. I think you have to be, if I had to start over again, I use the analogy, you gotta have more tools in your toolbox now. You can't just, come out of school like I did, even though I took, welding machining when I was in high school. I came right out and I was fishing before that, but I went full-time fishing, and at that point, you could go scalloping, you could go sword fishing, you could go, you were going anywhere from the Azores all the way up past the Grand Banks, Flemish Cap. You could go to New Bedford and go scalloping, you have a scallop season here. We could go shrimping, we could go ground fishing, so you just went from one to the next to the next. You don't have that now because of, in my view, they regulated it out, they pigeonholed everybody into one box, and now if you're a lobsterman, all you can do is go catch lobsters and pound them to death because you don't have anything else you can go do. They've taken that opportunity away. They've regulated a lot of things so stringently that you've lost the infrastructure. So crew is a huge problem. The biggest reason I got out of lobstering at the end of it for me was just what Randy said. was crew. I couldn't stand the drugs. I couldn't stand having to deal with guys that every day you went down there to go to work, you had somebody saying like, can't come to work today because of who knows what. Or in my case, if they smelled like pot or if they had any alcohol, they were done anyways, because I don't deal with that. So I made my move into seaweed harvesting because it's me. It's just me. I just do what I do on my boat. I don't have to deal with anybody else. I have to deal with landowners that think they own from here to England. But that's a whole nother story. And that has to do with real estate, telling these people that they own everything that they don't own. But that's a whole nother thing, you know, like we're involved, it's into a court case right now. You people probably aren't familiar with any of it. Well, the Aldemir case down at Goose Rocks Beach, if you're familiar with that got all solved because of landowners thinking they owned the whole beach all the way down to the low water mark. Well, that all got solved. They own to the high tide mark, which is what everybody, this whole state was founded on that. Nobody, there's only one piece of property that Edwin Churchill from Kennebec River to Piscataquis River that was granted by the king for the guy to wharf out. He gave him that piece of property. It was down by Timber Island, little river that comes out of Timber Island. That's the only piece. Okay, I've had people come up to me and say they own this or they own that. Most of the time, well, 100% of the time, they don't own it. But you see a break in the deed, if somebody's got in there and fiddled with the deed and said they own it. When you see that break in the deed, it's already a non-factor. They don't own anything. You own to the high tide mark. We have a wharf. We had a wharf down there. You got submerged land rights that you pay the state, but the inner tidal zone from the high tide mark to the low tide mark is the inner tidal zone. You can walk across that. You can go fishing. You can go hunting. You can do looking for sea glass. Nobody owns that piece, but you got a lot of people saying they own it. To go look at the tax maps, go look at the tax maps in St. George. Are you paying taxes on that from the high tide mark to the low tide mark? Haven't found anybody yet that's paying taxes on it. And I got into it with somebody a while back about that. If you think you own it, and you thought you own it since 1820, when the state became a state, one of the very first things that happened is from the head of tide to the continental shelf, and all the living things and blah, blah, blah belongs to the people of the state of Maine. It's held in public trust doctrine. And it's just been twisted around by lawyers, real estate people, and big money people moving in. And that's where I run into a lot of problems. And that'll probably get solved with this case here, the one we have going here now. If it doesn't, that case will be in the United States Supreme Court. And there's been 7 of them, Illinois versus Illinois Central Railroad, Mississippi versus Phillips Petroleum 66 are all decided in favor of the public trust doctrine. But anyways, they're getting into more than I want to get into. But I see, if I was young, you gotta have something else in your toolbox. You gotta either go to a trade school, which I'm all for, or you go to college, but you gotta have a few other things because we've lost control of where fishing was. You just went. You guys went hard, made money, and you survived. But they've taken that away from you at this point. You can only go do so much. You don't have control over things we used to have control over anymore.
Yeah.
Did a good job here.
Yeah. I don't have a lot to add, except I think what's interesting to listen is, this idea of diversification. There's a really great, diary down at the Marshall Point Lighthouse that I borrowed and might have photocopied from start to finish once upon a time. I think actually Alice in England has it. I passed it on to her, but it was this really wonderful diary of the keeper out at Whitehead Island, and it's from the like 1850s to 1860s. And it's the rhythm of this man's life, and like when he's planting potatoes and when he's fishing pogies and when he's fishing, like when the seasons change, when the things change. And I do think we've gotten, it's something I've always resisted personally. I didn't do well with like, you're gonna be this thing, like a silo. And I think part of our sending people off to higher education kept people in a box. And I'm kind of sad that I'm sandwiched between Randy and Hale, who've been specialists, but they've been specialists in industries that have been environmentally impacted by all of us. And I think the thing that's important to remember is we're all in this room, we're all the market. And so if we're not willing to reflect that back to the people who are trying to feed us, we have a problem. And I think that's part of what's happened culturally, is we think of everyone else as other, and we're never willing to come into a room like this. So I appreciate you all being here to say, you know what, we're the market. You know, these guys are trying to feed us, and we owe it to them to make sure they can keep doing what they do. And probably get another job. Can we let them, unless it's something specific to what somebody said, but do you guys want to answer what do you want the next generation to know? And then we'll go to, okay, cool.
Yeah, I would just echo the diversification and adaptability. I think, like, so our kids are gonna be exposed to all different tools, from hammers and nails to 3D printers and laser cutters. But what the tools will be 20 years from now, like, I have no idea. But we want our kids to be producers, not just consumers. We want them to build and create, not just take what other people give them and be dependent upon that. And we think that ability to think creatively, not to be afraid of problems. And the example that I'll give is, so my daughter, for Christmas, she made me this amazing, like, welded dragon bookshelf. And she's taking a welding class at Camden, and she just got in college. She wants to study something called bioinformatics. I don't even know what it is. But she took welding, and like, that is, I think, probably her favorite class. And what she wrote one of her college essays about it. She said, what I love about it is there's no one clear right answer or path. Like, every step is something else you have to figure out. And that forces me to look at things differently and work my brain in a different way and be able to fail and fail and fail before I get it right. So that, like, you know, struck me. Like, sometimes people say to me, well, you know, CTE is for kids who struggle in school. And that's just not true. I mean, what we're teaching benefits all kids. And part of what went wrong for the past 30 years is our schools failed a lot of kids who learn in a different way. We didn't value that way. And they got that message that they weren't valued. And that's part of the reason why I think we are where we are right now as a society in a lot of different ways.
Thanks. I think what I would want kids to know is that they can do anything. That there's a lot of opportunities out there. There's a lot of need. There's a lot of problems, but that every kid has the ability to find something in themselves that can help the community and help themselves. One of my favorite classes that we offer runs for 6 weeks, and it's called Lobster Rolls. And the first week we're doing the traditional science, where we're teaching kids, you know, what is a lobster, where, you know, what type of creature is it, how does it evolve, what's its morphology. And then we talk about what habitat it lives in, and then we have them use a camera to actually record it underwater and do video and do a voiceover and ask questions about the environment from the lobster's point of view. And each kid sees themselves sometime in the period as being able to do something that contributes to the whole class. So if it's a kid that just loves art but doesn't want to know science, or someone that's really into science, someone that wants to know about the environment, somewhere during that class, they're going to see an opportunity for them to contribute to the common good, and so their classmates can see how they're special and they have an ability that maybe they don't. So I think it's really important for kids to see themselves in all of these different jobs, whether, I've been writing in the corners here, do we need more environmental lawyers working for fishermen? Do we need more marketers? How do we help our kids learn to see themselves in different jobs that help the whole community?
So it's great. You had a question?
Yeah, just following up on that, I wanted to kind of get all of your thoughts and feedback for people that are interested in specifically really working on the water, whether that's, in a diverse way or with other things, but if, the concern of seaweed fishing, lobster and ground fishing, the cost of starting those businesses, especially when you have the potential for a 5-year return window, and if that, what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what your concerns are for kind of that next generation from that aspect, financial piece of it. I know, big question.
Pressing you.
50-year return window. I hate to break your bubble. but-
Yeah.
Thanks, no, that's good to know.
I personally think the resource, like I said, in ground fishing is a lot of it's rebuilt and it's healthy. I think, I'm old. I put my time in, I'm beat up, but, I think a couple of young folks, they really wanted to do it. And that they was taught. And they really put their nose down. I mean, my business is for sale. There's other ones for sale. Yeah, you do need a down payment. You're gonna have to have resources, but there is, access, I should say. There is opportunity, depends what they want, how much money they would be able to raise or go to a bank and cheat to get, to be able to buy into the business, but. What Mike's talking about, I would love to see these markets come back, cause I would love to teach young people how to do what I've done. Cause I've enjoyed what I've done. I'm gonna miss it. But I would really love to teach the next generation, how to build a net, mend twine, things like that. Cut fish. There's quite a lot to it, a lot more than that, but. It would be fun for me to do that, but I don't see it happening right now.
I think it would be important, to. I think it depends on circumstances. I mean, if I think about some of the farms I've seen grow more quickly, they're usually family, they're usually extended family, not just 2, but maybe 5. I think multiple generations can be really helpful, like people just bring different skill sets. So I think there's an advantage to that. I remember when John and I started, I went looking like, okay, what's a 2-person oyster farm, like, what are some of the, it's hard to find the statistics, frankly, because there's not a lot. But it gave a picture of, oh yeah, we could manage that. But the truth is, to actually make it make sense financially, I think you have to be able to do more than just a 2-person operation. And then figuring out how to get there. So if I were a kid and I wanted to start an oyster farm, I'd probably rope my parents in. I'd rope in a couple of siblings or some friends. I'd have a trade job that paid really good money. And then I'd slowly drip some of that extra cash into, because it takes a long time, like, just because you say, oh, I want to start a farm, you still have to fill out all the paperwork, you have to apply to the DMR, you have to manage all of the process that can take at least 5 years. So if you're an 18-year-old, you might get going by the time you're in your mid-20s. And that's not bad, but then I would say, like, you want to figure out something else that can help. So I think it's not impossible, I just think it's not set up. It's because banks don't know what you're talking about, like, there's not a lot of history for them to say, oh, sure, you're starting an oyster farm, I know that in 10 years, in 50 years, that's gonna be a viable thing, so I think that makes it challenging too, it's just not normal yet. In terms of aquaculture, yeah.
I think it's pretty difficult, to somebody to start out in it, I mean, there's people sitting here in this room, like my brother, for instance, that has scallop permits, he's got his lobster permit, he's got all that, but a young guy starting out, they want to come get Randy's operation. it's one thing buying his boat, but then you have his permits on top of that they have got to pay for. And the price of ground fish and that stuff is really making it hard to warrant these big steep investments into this stuff. And it's turned into conglomerate. The ground fishing has turned into big time fisheries, big time, big time owners that have bought a lot of quota up. And that's where it's gone to. I mean, the small guy has a hard time making it. You can't, it's very, even what I'm doing, I was lucky. I made the move when I did, but my market is very niche market. So to have 3 other guys get in it, it's almost an impossibility for a lot of reasons, but one is there's only so much bottom and you're trying to rotate across there, but you gotta have the market. If you don't have the market, you can't, you're dead in the water. So I think for somebody starting out, it's really difficult unless they got some, some financial force behind them to buy the stuff.
Hey, Hale, can you tell us a little bit about what the end result is of this seaweed you're harvesting? I think a lot of people don't, I know, but a lot of people don't know where it all ends up and what it's used for.
The guy that started my business, the business, Bob Morris, he started originally for cattle feed. It wasn't the rockweed you see taken off the shore. They dry it and then they run it through it looks like if the old newspaper places where the newspaper used to go through the reels like that, but the drums are heated and they cook it down and then they run that liquid across there, it heats it, and then they run it through different mill-sized grinders, and that is the stuff you're reading about now. You put into you add a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons to the cow feed, things like that, because they're getting the minerals that it's not in the earth soil anymore, like selenium, things like that. That's what he started it on. They still do it, but now the biggest part of it is highly concentrated organic liquid form of fertilizer that gets mixed 100 to 1, like 1 gallon of this to 100 gallons of water that they're spraying on the fields and getting rid of the pesticides and that stuff. And most of it is going, not most of it, but a big portion of it's going over to the EU, and the big agribusinesses are buying it in the US. That's what the market is of that basically right now. So it's a lot of it's replacing pesticides and replenishing the earth. That's where the bulk of that goes.
Get Tad and then Jerry.
Just to have Randy and Hale, I think part of the problem, at least from a fisherman's point of view, is the media and how they paint us. Some of it's deserved, but I think a lot of it's misleading. They talk about ground fishing. You want to talk to Randy, he can probably tell you how much bottom contact he's got going on with his net and stuff like that. I mean, they paint all draggers in a bad light, and that's not the reality of the situation. So I think media has a lot to do with where we're at today. Paint it in a really bad environmental way, whether it's true or it's not, most people don't know that. And I think that might affect how they buy or how they support the fisheries in the other way. And I think, we've come a long way. We've made mistakes, everybody makes mistakes, but all the fisheries have come a long ways. There's a lot of management, and you're trying to manage something that's underneath fathoms of water that you can't see. So nobody has a clear-cut answer. One thing, these guys are seeing it every day. They have a piece to say in that, should be listened to.
Jerry, did you?
Well, she asked the question, how much does it cost to get in the fishery? And I would leave the ground fishing, that's a little bit expensive, but I wanna speak on behalf of the Pork Fishing Co-op. So we run the Bullfight Co-op, my brother sells there, Brendan sells there, Randy fishes out of there. And we have our annual meeting and I look around and we got 7 young kids coming up. Now, this is great. We're gonna be replaced the way it should be. The cost is $5,000 to $15,000 for a kid to get a skip. Usually the traps are handed down from his parents or grandparents or anything like that, and then he builds up. He starts his business as a kid and he builds up. The Randy ground fishing, I am the president of the sector, that's a fishing group. It's up from Gloucester to Cutler. We had our annual meeting last year. It was the youngest group I've ever seen sitting at that table. I'm optimistic. Waterfront brings in $26 million to the town of St. George. It's not bad. Not bad at all. Do I like all the fishermen have all their eggs in one basket? No. But I have been fortunate enough that when I built my business, I built it up. And as I got money to buy into other fisheries, I bought into it. So I am pretty damn optimistic and I think fishing has been pretty damn good to St. George.
Wasn't that number last year, wasn't that number 75 million on the peninsula kicked around? I think it was.
I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know St. George.
Wasn't it high?
No.
It was pretty high
glad to.
for the whole peninsula.
It's closer to 30, but he's touching his lobster. You include all the others.
I think you're gonna find, if you go back through your stuff, it's around 75 million for the county schools had the whole peninsula, the whole area. Around 75 million.
I just wanted to say too, it does, every fishery takes a lot of investment. Maine has a great apprenticeship program for lobster, kids from lobstering families too. I think it's 1,000 hours, maybe, right? Yes, okay, thank you. So you're gonna do 1,000 hours, so it's important to start at kind of a young age. It's an amazing summer job for kids that are out there on the water. They learn so many different things. I think, and I'm gonna bring this back to, it helps to have the support and resources for kids to make the investment in that type of opportunity. It has a big payoff, just mentally, financially and everything, but it's important to have these types of programs and people that are willing to support kids with those types of resources to be able to make that investment, both with like their time, because that is a lot of effort. And then to Jerry's point too, having people that are like, my daughter needed rope the other day and she was looking around to buy it and a lobsterman had some extra and gave it to her because she's a young fisherman and she's trying to get started. And I think it's been so amazing to watch the community to come out and like support kids. And I'm sure the same happens here in St. George. So on that note too, you said, Tony, we are the market. Everybody in this room is the market. So my question for everybody on the panel is, what can everybody in here do to support and help some of the things that we've been talking about continue? Because I think it's important also, just all note to sort of end on a kind of
American fish.
I mean, that's the easiest one. I totally agree with
I
you.
went to
By
Belfast
Maine
today.
specifically American too. So we'll start with you. Go ahead.
I went to Belfast today, right out of the blues, nothing to do with shopping or anything. Pulled in the parking lot, there's a girl backed up, actually, she's a Benner from down here. And she's got a pickup truck selling scallops out of the back.
Perfect.
Flashed me back 50 years when I used to sell my own shrimp I caught out of the back of my pickup truck.
So
So
first one is
that
by,
fishery supported these coastal communities forever. And if some of the regulation would go away, they would continue to.
so first up, buy local seafood specifically, American especially.
Well, and talk about it, whether you're teaching kids to be good journalists or having them, shadow a fisherman. We have a lot of people that do work with oysters, with seaweeds, come and talk to our students. We go out to the clam flats. But one of the things I'd like to see next time is a whole panel of kids. I think that would be awesome, because I'm optimistic too, just like Jerry. I see, whenever I see any kind of problems with this, with the environment or with jobs or with attention spans or whatever, I'm more optimistic than I am pessimistic.
I mean, I would say, from a school's perspective, get involved. I always say our school can do what it can do because of our community. And that's from, we've got a variety of different volunteers coming in, working with kids, designing programs for kids. We've got businesses that come and work with our kids, that invite our kids to go to their locations. And I think through that, the kids are really hungry for that mentorship. So, I think Randy, when that building's done, like, we want to have, local people come and share skills. We would love to have you teach classes on all those skills that you have and pass it on to that next generation. That's part of what we want to do. So I think it's that involvement, that working with the kids. And I think part of it from our perspective as a school district is to keep those kids engaged and really instill in them a drive and a work ethic and that entrepreneurial spirit, where understand that you're gonna fail multiple times before you succeed, and there is no easy path. There is no, like, you click and all. Like, one thing the teachers talk about now is the younger ones, when they're like first grade or whatever, and they're learning like their letters and they write an A, they walk up to the teacher, like, look at my A. And they're on these video games with these learning apps where every time they do something, like, balloons come and confetti lights up. They think the teacher's gonna start throwing glitter into the air. And the teacher's like, good job, go do another one. And I think part of it is instilling in them just that ethic of hard work. You're not always gonna get a celebration every time you get something right, and you will 30 times before you succeed. And I think if we can instill that in our kids, that'll solve a lot of problems.
I agree with Mike. I like that, teaching them, that's the main thing right there. Teaching the next generation how to do these things on the waterfront, whatever it is, boat building, fishing. There's a lot to, more to it than just being on the water, it takes, we have hydraulics companies that do the hydraulics, and we have, mechanics do the engines, things of that nature. But I think that, I don't know how many of you do this, but I do it. When I go somewhere to eat, someplace new, I always get seafood. That's just who I am. I love seafood. But I always ask, where'd that come from? You start doing that, and you try to make it a point, you're just gonna eat local. That'll be a huge change for all these local fishermen here in St. George, and all along the whole Maine coast. Because over 9% what you're eating in these places are imports. And that's sad. Because I think the resources that we have in our own waters could probably feed our nation.
What to choose? I'm feeling touched by Mike's comment earlier about the last 20 to 30 years of our education system, perhaps not viewing kids who didn't fit into the traditional classroom as a really important thing that we all leave and remember, is that every kid is worthy. I think one of the problems we have cyclically as a culture is, kids screw up, they get into drugs, they get into alcohol, and there aren't enough systems to get them out. And then they get brought down. And I think our human resource, we keep talking about wanting more people to do the jobs that need to be done. And I'm super excited to hear from Jerry that he's excited about what's happening in those rooms. I'm super excited by Sarah and Mike. And I think then that just means we need to go out and perpetrate that human resource, that anybody and everybody is worthy, and catching fish is a really hard job and a really beautiful job, and it's deserves our respect.
I think, we have, if you have, I go back to like infrastructure, or when you, the dynamics of this town has changed considerably. I mean, if they were rolling, tractor trailers out of Port Clyde right now like we used to when we were landing fish going to Americana back in the 70s, there'd be an uproar, people, so those things, those things kind of stymie some of the things we talked about here, because it's kind of like not in my backyard. You want to support the fishing or this or that, the other thing, but there's some of those things that come along with it that you've got to understand. that's what it takes to work, like trucks coming to pick up lobsters and moving the lobsters out to the market. And the other part of it is the biggest seafood market in the world is the United States. It imports, we are the biggest. Everybody wants to get to the United States. We're the biggest importer and the biggest seafood buyer in the world. Yet we have our own resources out there that we're being choked down on because of, I don't even know why anymore. They can't even justify most of it anymore with phony baloney science that they're using and that stuff. So, but I think if the groundfish incident came back, for instance, you know, and they start running trucks out of the new pier they got down there, you know, what kind of impact is that gonna have, you know, in how are people gonna feel about it? I mean, that's what used to happen, but, you know, are you gonna have a meltdown because they're rolling 3 tractor trailers out of there every night with fish or lobsters or whatever else is going on? So I mean, those kinds of things have to be thought of. When we built our dock down there, we had a big hullabaloo about how our lights were, so we made all our lights downward facing. But yet, I see all the people that live around me that only there in the summertime, they got their lights on, outside lights on, and they're on everywhere. You can't even see, you can't see the stars. So I'm thinking, oh, yeah, it's pretty, you don't want my dock lights facing this way, but you can have lights on because you're scared to death of the dark. I mean, it's ridiculous. Yeah, I think those things really need to be thought of.
But Jane, go ahead.
Oh, Monique, you asked what could people here do, and being on the select board, and I know all 5 of us on the select board are here, either on Zoom or in person. I'm interested in hearing from people what you feel like the select board, the town government can do to help. And I know one thing we have talked about before is Monique's group has the scuttlebutt for Harpswell. That's an educational tool to make sure people who don't live and work on the waterfront understand that it means lights and noise and trucks and people cutting through to get to Clam Flats and, you know, please accommodate your neighbors. This is who we are. But are there other things the town could be doing to help?
We have the scuttlebutt in Harpswell, Goldsboro, Brunswick, and we're working with Freeport and Kittery, and St. George is on the list, so hopefully we can work with you guys soon. You guys have any thoughts for select board?
I can say one thing.
I got one.
This town.
I got one.
Yeah.
Get rid of that perfume tax. That's what I was just saying.
You
So,
stifling all.
Can't believe it went this long without somebody bringing it up.
What's that?
Believe it went this long without somebody bringing it up.
so, so the question he raised is about the personal property tax. It's a tax on business equipment that is required by the state of Maine.
Tell the state to go to hell.
And so we're not gonna start doing that right now. And I have some concerns about the way in which the state categorizes this, that it's not fair for different businesses. Which I met with Ann Matlack to talk to her about that. As for example, short-term rentals or people who work at home and have computers and printers and stuff. It needs to be the same for everybody. So if your traps are being taxed, so should their office chair be taxed or whatever. If they're gonna do it, it needs to be the same. So I'm talking to people at the state and the Maine Municipal Association to push back on that, but it is a requirement and the select board has no discretion, so.
Can I do a follow-up on that? That has been a discussion for 10 years. And the select board's been pushing it off and pushing it off. This select board voted it through. So I hear you loud and clear, but it goes through, I talked to fishermen from Kittery. That's what Tammy. And every town deals with this, and I'm sorry that I'm so spread out between Wales and everything else. I can't attend every meeting, and I should have been at this meeting when you guys were talking about it, because I would have threw a freaking stink.
Well, we'll be talking about it again. So we shouldn't take up too much time here, but
Yeah, I don't
we
wanna
hear
take time here,
you, we
but
hear you,
She
and
asked the question, you asked,
I did.
and I wanted to answer.
And I do wanna know what are there other things that town can do? I'm not sure that we can violate the law.
Anything
That's not
taxing
on
the
the
fishermen,
list.
get rid of it.
Yes.
So-
Okay, and you had a question up front too?
Trustee Hale, are people like us who own oceanfront property inhibiting your access to rockweed, seaweed, or whatever you?
Can you repeat the question so everybody can hear?
She asked if people that live on the waterfront, are inhibiting access to seaweed. I imagine it's not everybody, but.
Yes, I mean, I don't have, some places I have some problems in St. George. I don't typically have many problems, but to answer your question, yes, because they don't wanna see somebody down there in their front yard harvesting seaweed. Because, I don't, well, when the big money rolls in, the big money wants what they want. And that picture of somebody harvesting seaweed in their front yard is not what the picture they think they're paying for.
No,
Yeah.
we've been here forever and I've never had anybody ask if they could, seen a boat out there.
Yeah, I mean, the only, see, I'm coming in by water, so I don't have to ask you to harvest seaweed, but where I run into problems is what I stated before, is what somebody thinks they own to the low tide mark. Okay, like they did in the Aldemir case down in Goose Rocks Beach, or I run into it once in a while at Islesboro, and by the time I'm usually done, I don't get bothered again. The wardens, you know, I typically, I'll call the wardens up, say, you know, and then they might come talk to them, because you can't. Unless you can prove that you own that in a title zone, then you've got no leg to stand on. I mean, I have to light in the wintertime, sometimes I'm harvesting in the middle of the night because the wind lets down or things work out that way, but come summertime, you know, typically May through September, I try. And we're getting more sunlight, I try to keep my activities to the daylight, so, you know, so people aren't getting as upset, you know what I mean? I try to keep that way. So so it's not like, and I've spent an enormous amount of money on my seaweed harvester there, to bring the decibels down. You know, I got a decibel meter and I mean, you know, your lawnmower, your average snow blower is 105 decibels, 107 decibels. My seaweed harvester, when I'm running full tilt, is about 80 to 85 decibels. So, I mean, you know, everybody's out there, you know, having their lawns mowed, or their weed whackers, they're even worse, you know. And you go into town, I used to come in from Islesboro and I'd run into Camden and it sounded like a bunch of bees. That's what it sounded, I mean, what was just weed whackers and lawnmowers, I'm thinking, and they're complaining about my seaweed harvester. It's ridiculous, but most part, I don't get bothered too much, but I think it's, what people think they own that they don't own.
So, we got one quick question, cause we gotta wrap up. So go ahead. You got
Not a question, it's a statement.
Okay,
I've
make it
got a
quick.
better statement as a question. One group that's been beat up really bad for a long time, we identified this last year, this is the clam diggers.
Yeah.
And they're a little bit, they're like a lot of us, they're a little bit to fault. All of us have got skeletons in our closets. We've been in the commercial fishing business. But, you know, leaving litter around and just barging their way in. But there was a time in my lifetime when you could just walk through somebody's yard and go down and dig yourself a mess of clams or dig clams to sell. And it happened, it did it, we all did it. I did it as a kid. But I grew up in Falmouth. I'd be shot if I walked through someone's dooryard in Falmouth West Side now. There'd be 30 cops down there carrying the crazy guy off the P6. You know, but times have changed. But that group has gotten beat up really bad.
There was actually someone in our office yesterday talking about clam harvesters. So, there's 10 pizzas. Yes, Jerry?
I gotta do the same statement. I can't help it. I'm like Dan, I got a big mouth. Good. I've heard a lot of things about market. What can we do? And I think that what people ask me, I think the biggest thing I tell people. Look at an organization like, I'm gonna use Maine Coast, I'm even on the board, and maybe I shouldn't, because I have a personal friend. But Maine Coast Fishermen's Association, which Monty belongs to. We have a working waterfront program, we're doing this, we're helping host this tonight. We have a feeding Mainer program where we bring $2 average fish to the fishermen. And give underprivileged people the right to eat fish, in which they should. We are now working on a fish cake. And we're bringing it to the schools. The way you can help is support these organizations, not just us. You got Herring Gut. Look at the community did. They came out and supported Mike in the makerspace. I mean, what a great community. So. If you, something that you think you can do to make a big help, look at an organization, look them up, read about them, and if it's a fit, support them. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. That actually segues nicely into what I was. I was gonna say, I mean, a lot of the issues that are in St. George are happening in other communities. We're having similar conversations all along the coast about property usage and fishermen being able to harvest in the intertidal, whether that's seaweed or clams, aquaculture, access to markets, and people want to know what they can do, buy local seafood like we talked about. To Jerry's point, supporting programs like Maine Coast Fishermen's Association or the Makerspace or Herring Gut. Those types of things are really important. I think the education aspect with something like a scuttlebutt is, we'd love to do one with St. George, because I think a lot of it is people don't know what they don't know about commercial fishing. Married to a fisherman for 20 years and working for the industry for 15, and I still learn something new every day. So please, again, visit MCFA's website. Thanks to the town for hosting and Jane for pulling this together, and Tony. I'm so happy. I always love to come and visit St. George. Like I said, there's 10 pizzas over there that I think need to be eaten. So please hang out for a few minutes and grab something to eat. And thank you all so much for coming. It's great to have these conversations.
Island Institute.
Oh, yeah.
Our island.
A lot of the work.
She did do a lot of the work.
So sorry. Thank you, everybody. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much from afar.
Well, yeah, that's okay.